Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is a build for the Magma Wyrm Scalesword, a really fun weapon to use, something that you can buff a lot to do thousands of damage, and this was one of the better ones I've done recently. This came out fantastically, it does a ton of damage, and at level 150, you can absolutely shred with the Magma Wyrm Scalesword. This is day 4, by the way, of our build a day until they announce DLC. That's right, we're doing a build every day until they announce DLC. This is going to be absolutely wild, so definitely hit that subscribe button and join this channel if you want to join in the fun on this, because honestly, it's been a blast so far and it's going to continue to be fun. Now, the Magma Wyrm Scalesword is based off of Strength and Faith, which is really my favorite category in Eldenring because it includes things like the Blasphemous Blade, and then obviously, if you go Pure Strength, the Giant Crusher, and then Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike and whatnot for Pure Faith. Now, the Scalesword's a little bit different than, for instance, the Magma Blades, where the weapon art scales almost purely with Faith. The weapon art here acts a little bit differently. And how does the Scalesword act differently? Well, it's weird how it is to buff because it's split damage. Now, the Ash of War isn't purely Faith or purely Strength, and actually, it leans more towards Strength than Faith, probably because it's such a heavy weapon, and a lot of it is the slam down part, that it actually leans more towards Strength than Faith, and in between the damage, I don't know the specific numbers, but it seems to be split between the two. Now, much like the Magma Wyrm's actual move when he uses the weapon, it starts with a slam down and then a drag back of the sword that leaves a pool of lava. That pool of lava can do continuous damage, much like the Magma Blades, and that initial slam down can do a lot. Actually, as I was doing this video, I was surprised to find out that the Scalesword was able to do thousands of damage with just a couple of buffs. This was a weapon I had used before, but not to this extent, and it turned out really well. This was a fantastic weapon to do. It's a very strong weapon, and although it does leave you a little bit vulnerable, you at least jump down where you're really low and you can avoid some attacks in the process, and this is something that could probably work on main bosses, as well as obviously in this video, a lot of field bosses where this thing just absolutely destroys by doing tons of damage. And as you can see here, and if you were to use it on fire-resistant enemies, obviously there's going to be a trade-off, but it is a lot of physical damage, which makes up for that. And fire is actually really good in Elden Ring. There's a lot of bosses in the game that are neutral or weak to fire. As you saw with the tree avatar in the beginning, they take additional fire damage, and a lot of the main bosses, demigod bosses and whatnot, aside from Mog and Rykard, are weak or neutral to fire, which I actually consider weak because they take the full complement of damage, so it's a good element to have in Elden Ring. Another bonus is, while I didn't show it in this video because the Magma Wyrm had already been dead, I could have showed, I guess, where it was on the map in that aspect, but it's in the ruin precipice area at the end of the area of the lakes. It's actually very easy to get this early in the game. Technically speaking, if you wanted to play an entire playthrough with this weapon, you could literally go around Stormville via that passage and all the way up until you get to that area at the end of the lakes, and then fight the Magma Wyrm that drops the weapon there, and you'd have a very powerful early game Strength Faith weapon that can do a lot of damage. So that's something to keep in mind if you want to grab this early. Now for mob control, this absolutely destroys and wrecks. I tested it first before anywhere else at Gatefront because I wanted to see how it did. It does a lot of damage. Mobs will absolutely get destroyed by it. The initial slam down and contact, and then even general regular hits with this, it has really high attack. So this thing is fantastic for mob control. Not a lot of worries there. There's actually a lot of situations where they're going to hit over you too because of that low kind of dive jump. It's not a jump attack, by the way, not boosted by the Claw Talisman. But as you can see, the animation itself kind of gives you a lot of leeway, and in many cases, a lot of enemies and bosses may miss you, which is a huge benefit to using this weapon for the fact that it does so much damage and a lot of it can be avoided as far as being hit and stuff. The weapon itself can't be avoided, but as far as being hit, you may be able to avoid that while also doing a ton of damage. It is really quite good. I really enjoyed this. The Magma Wyrm Scalesword is very good. Now for buffs, we're drinking our tier, which has the fire tier in it. We're casting Blessing's Boon for some extra HP because we're playing it a little risky. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and then we're tapering off our FP with the flask there. and then we jump into battle. And the NPC invader that's at the round table hold here did not stand much of a chance at all. He absolutely got destroyed by the weapon art. So we're using the Magma Wyrm Scalesword plus 10. Any seal will do. We have the jar on. That's the Sanguine Noble Rope. People have asked about that one. Shard of Alexander, Ritual Swords Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm, Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman, and then we have the Fire tier along with the Defense tier to give us a defense boost as well. Now, the Fire Scorpion Charm and the Fire tier will boost it, but only to a certain extent, only to about half of it, because as I said, it is pretty much split damage. There's a lot of physical damage in there as well, but you can boost it with some fire boosting stuff too. For stats, we went with 60 Strength because it leans more towards Strength, 40 Faith, and then I wanted 50 Vigor for this one because we're really spamming and using the weapon art a lot, because that's the best part about this weapon. Even though it does have really high regular attack damage, the weapon art is a lot of fun to use. And we're going to show off the build a little bit more by taking on some more field bosses that are available. By the way, this was Journey, I think 4 on this character. I have a couple of different characters, I think 7 at this point. This specific one is on Journey 4. So the bosses have a little bit more HP, but they're not maxed out or anything. So it's still within pretty reason. I know a lot of my characters now, at least 4 of them are on the max scaling of the game, which makes it a little difficult because everything's particularly tanky, which makes it difficult to do a ton of damage to some of the bosses in the game. But I don't think there'd be a massive trade-off. As I mentioned before, there's not a massive trade-off for this weapon because it does do so much damage. If you were to use this even on New Game Plus 7 and whatnot, you'd probably still get a ton of damage out of it, probably still shred some bosses, because it really does do thousands of damage with simple buffs like Golden Vow. And Flame Grant Me Strength is really great for this one because it boosts both fire and physical, and we're doing both physical and fire damage with the weapon art. So Flame Grant Me Strength is basically perfect. I would pick that over Howl or Blood Boil if you're given the opportunity. And this is a really fun weapon to use. This ended up being a lot more fun than some of the other weapons that I've done lately. I've never covered a lot of bleed builds, and I don't mind bleed builds and stuff, but I really always love Faith and Strength Faith weapons. So this was another one that was on that list that was a lot of fun. Strength and Faith for me is the most fun in the game. Doing fire damage is really cool. Being able to buff this and hit for thousands of damage is a lot of fun. This is a very, very good weapon. And it's a weapon that you don't even have to wait too late in the game to get either, which is awesome. It has a little bit hefty requirements, but nothing too crazy that you can't handle at the end of the early game, certainly not by the mid game. Keep in mind, too, if there's any of those pesky tree avatars that you're having a hard time with, if you're having difficulty with them, fire in general, a weapon like this will absolutely destroy them. Anything that does fire damage at all, even the Rivers of Blood, which does like minimal fire damage in comparison to some strength weapons and heavier fire weapons, still can actually rip up tree avatars in the sense that they're just going to get destroyed by anything that's fire. I think they take 40% or more additional fire damage. So keep that in mind. If you're having trouble with that, and you even have something like the Rivers of Blood or Eleanor's Pole Blade or any of those will work. And then anything heavier will absolutely obliterate those guys and destroy them with ease. Just wanted to show the end of this fight for the couple of hits. I did get beat up a little bit because these things are always annoying. But anyway, I wanted to show how much the pure damage was simply just on the R1s, or I think RB for Xbox or whatever. You're just hitting basically a light attack and you're still doing a ton of damage because these have really, really high damage in general. The Magma Wyrm Scaleswords are awesome. And if you were to get a second one, dual wield it and power stance it, even more the better. It's going to be really powerful because this was a very powerful, very, very fun weapon to use. And that's where you get the red feathered branch sword, by the way, for anybody that's wondering, for the low health procs that I do. It's from that Deathbird. Yeah, power stancing these would be quite fun. I didn't do that for this run, but yeah, that would be pretty cool too. It's going to be a little bit weighty, but even so, you're going to do a lot of damage with that. This was a really fun weapon. This was fantastic to use. And this is now day 4 of our build a day until they announce DLC, which we'll continue to do. So definitely subscribe if you're into that, if you want to see a build a day and see how far we can go with this, how long we can make it. I'm going to try my best, do everything I can to make it happen. Hopefully they announce DLC soon. But in the meantime, there's a ton of awesome builds on my channel. Be sure to check those out. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys there.